Hello.
Hello, Julie. Great to
And
be back.
good to be back. And hello, Marilyn. How are you?
Hi. Great to be in San Diego.
Yeah, well, virtually, right? I love it.
Virtually.
And Gary, yes, welcome back. It's great to have you back.
Yes,
Is
thank you.
this
Thanks
book
for
2
having
for
me.
you, or
This is book 2 for me.
this is book 2? I wasn't sure if you had anything before the one that we hosted you last time for.
Yeah. No, primarily I'm a screenwriter and playwright, and I've come to books a little later in my career as I've expanded all my writing disciplines, but it's been a real joy.
Lots of different, well, I'm sure you'll get into that conversation. That's a great question in the conversation. So if you don't get to it, Marilyn, I will be asking that is what you like better and what's the different things about that, because they're very different disciplines.
Very different. Yeah.
You know, because we've hosted a number of authors that were previously or that are continuing, but some of them are retired from screenwriting and have gone to completely just novelists. But yeah, it's a completely different discipline.
Yeah.
So just a little housekeeping before we get started here. So if you are watching us with Facebook Live right now, I'm going to be chatting with you in the comment section. I'm going to be putting in how to order. That lovely book behind Gary is The Mother I Never Had. And we were talking in the green room earlier. I love that cover. So good. Cover. Really good cover. Spot on that. So I'll be putting how to order that in the chat. If you're watching us on YouTube later, I'm sorry that we're not live with you, but it's a great conversation. So stay here with us and it'll be a wonderful conversation. Gary and Marilyn are going to talk for about 30-ish minutes. So if you are with us live on Facebook, please make sure that you start asking some questions. We love the audience interaction and the audience questions. So please make sure you pop those in and we'll bring those to Gary when Marilyn and he are done with their conversation. So let me introduce these two and then I'll go away for a while. So Gary Goldstein is an award-winning writer for film, TV, and the theater with more than 30 produced screen and stage credits. The New York native and longtime LA resident has also been a contributing film reviewer and arts feature writer for the Los Angeles Times since 2007. His first novel, which he was here with us for that, the romantic comedy The Last Birthday Party, won a 2022 IBPA Benjamin Franklin Award for Excellence in Fiction. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. It was great.
Yeah, I bet that was. And like I said, we're here to talk today about his latest book, The Mother I Never Had. Joining him is Marilyn, Simon, and Rothstein. Marilyn is the author of 3 novels, Crazy to Leave You, Husbands and Other Sharp Objects, love that title, and Lift and Separate. She grew up in New York City, earned a degree in journalism from New York University, began her writing career at 17 magazine, married a man she met in the elevator. We might need to get to that story, and owned an advertising agency for 25 years. You two have a great conversation and we'll see you in a little bit.
Thank you. So Gary,
Marilyn, just us.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
I'm here in Los Angeles and Marilyn is in Avon, Connecticut, right?
That's exactly where I am. We're both ex-New Yorkers, yes. And we're both writers who've written a lot of different things. And I was wondering if you could tell me what made you get started with novel writing, because your talents are so spread over so many wonderful things.
Yeah. Well, I've been a reader my whole life. As a kid, I read novels all the time, and to this day, I'm always reading one book or another. And I started off as a screenwriter. I continue as a screenwriter to this day, but screenwriting is it's so time consuming, and if you want to do it well, it just takes a lot of time, a lot of focus. And so I've mostly written TV and movie scripts most of my career. I kind of expanded out into writing stage plays at a certain point because I wanted to try that, and I love the theater and wanted to be part of that. And then over time, I would think about the concept of writing a novel, and just the fact that it seemed like such a giant undertaking. You write a screenplay, it can take a very long time, but at least it's a little more finite. There's a time element to it. There's a limited number of pages, et cetera. And with the book, it was kind of overwhelming to me, kind of daunting. But I had a story I kind of wanted to tell, or an arena I wanted to explore at a couple of years ago at that particular point in my life. And I read something on Twitter at the very end of 2019. Some screenwriter I followed said, if you're a screenwriter and you've always wanted to write a novel, but you think you're too busy to do it, look at it this way. if you started January 1st and wrote a page a day, at the end of the year, you would end up with the first draft of a full novel, which actually maybe more than a full novel. And I thought about that, and I was like, well, no pun intended, it's not the most novel thought, but yeah, it makes sense. And I just, January 3rd or something of 2020, before the pandemic, I started working on my novel, which became The Last Birthday Party. It was called something else originally. And that story, which is a romantic comedy set sort of against Hollywood, was kind of an amalgam of so much of the kinds of things I've written, the life that I've led, the people that I've met, and all of that. And it was such a great experience, unfortunately, to get to have it come out, I hope well, and to get it published, that I learned so much that I was like, I've got to do this again. I've got to amortize everything I learned. And I had another idea for a book. It was different. It was drama, so it was a little different for me, but I really wanted to do it. And so at the beginning of 2021, I used that same page a day thing. It was, honestly, it was more than a page a day on the last book. It's just depending upon my time schedule. And the pandemic in 2020 did help one thing, which was my more free time to actually work on the book. Last year it got busier again, and my book, the first book, was published, so it took me a little longer to write this one. But I love the writing of novels. I love the prose writing. I learned a lot about it, and I think it's a great way to express myself. But I'm still working on screenplays. I just finished writing 2 television movies back to back, and we'll see. I have an idea for a third novel I like to do. So once I have a little clear space, I may get into that. But so far, it's been great.
I have to tell you, I too love the cover, but I love the title the most.
Yeah.
So, did you have that title before you started writing, or did you think of it along the way?
Very good question, because as a screenwriter, I've written many scripts and plays that I had the title for before I even had a story. And this was a case where I don't remember, honestly, I don't remember if I had I don't think I had the title first, but I like the title. The title sort of hit me in a way, and it was a title that hasn't been used. I think there's been the Mother I Never Knew and things like that. But to me, there's sort of irony in this title, like the Mother I Never Had, which is about, this book is about a man who discovers that he has a mother who he never knew existed. His whole life, he thought his mother was somebody else, and it turns out his mother is a completely different person. And it's all about, what do you do when you, as a 30-year-old man, you discover that you have a parent that you never knew existed, that you were lied to your entire life about her being, and there she is. What do you do with that? What do you do with having a parent in your life like that for the first time? So I found there was an irony to the title a little bit. So it was really less about the mother I never knew, and it's really the mother I never knew I had. But I don't think I came to the title first, if I remember correctly.
What is your mother? Is your mother still with us? Before I
No, well,
I was going to say, what does she think of the title?
Yeah, she loves it. No, unfortunately, well, my mother, because my mother died when I was 30, like the main character in Mother I Never Had, Nate, he's 30 and his father dies, and his father has raised him as a single parent his whole life. He has told Nate that his biological mother died in childbirth, and Jim, Nate's father, has raised him alone his entire life. So my mother died at the same age, and it was, she was very young at the time. She was 62, which ironically, and I don't even think I planned it, is the age that Nate's father is in the book when he dies. But when you're 30 years old, and my father was still alive. He lived, he's gone now, but he lived for many years after that. So I did have one parent, but not having that mother relationship, which my mother was great and very special, and we had a real friendship, and she was incredibly encouraging, and somebody who I think I really kind of credit my love of reading and plays and everything, to her, was always supportive of that. It was like, she was kind of wrenched away from my sister and me, for so early, and she missed so much. And after she died, for a long time, your mind plays tricks on you. And I would sit in my car at a stoplight, and I would say, women would walk past me, and I would say, oh, wait, that looks just like my mother, and she did, for that flash. And so, you think about, what if you ended, you missed this dynamic, this maternal dynamic. What if somebody else showed up and was my mother? And I kind of thought about that a bit over time, and and I kind of tucked that thought away. I mean, that concept kind of disappeared personally for me. You just adjust to a loss over time, but it was an idea that I tucked away, and it became the seed of this story. This story of, the story is completely unautobiographical. But I think it's, in this era of 23andMe and Ancestry.com and people finding out of nowhere their relatives that they lost or never knew existed, it seemed like kind of an interesting time to kind of resurrect that seed of the idea about my mother and my feeling about finding another mother, and turning it into some kind of fictionalized story. So that's where she kind of hovers over it, but she's definitely nothing like the mother in this movie, in this book, and kind of what happened to her. But she's definitely, that seeded the inspiration for me.
Yes, the portrait of the mother in this book is so well drawn, and she's provocative. And I was wondering what made you think to make her that kind of personality?
Well, because the book is a little bit of a mystery within its family drama genre. It is a bit of a mystery because the history of Nate, the main character's father, and the woman who turns out to be his actual mother, the layers of the onion unpeel over the course of the story. We learn as Nate learns all of these things that he never knew. So I wanted the woman who comes into his life to be a little provocative, because I didn't want to play the hand. I mean, if you read about the book, you obviously know what happens. But as you're reading it, if you go in knowing nothing, it's kind of a surprise. This woman who comes into his life and what happens, in that relationship. And she's kind of provocative. She's attractive. She's not, hugely older than him. She could be maybe his much older sister or something in a big family. So I kind of wanted to have kind of a bit of a red herring about what her interest in him really might have been, until we really understand what she's about, and what she's really doing there, coming into living in the book. She's new to LA, and she rents this house and hires Nate, who's a landscape designer, kind of anonymously to landscape her house. And that's where the relationship begins. That's how she kind of draws him in. But I thought being provocative would give us some really kind of send us off the scent of the path, and look at it like, what is this going to be? Is this going to be something romantic? Is this going to be something? What does she want? And then we discover it's something that he had absolutely no idea at all, of what she really wanted. And kicks off from there.
Well, speaking about romantic, he has a relationship with his girlfriend that's on again, off again. And I found that relationship just fascinating because of the age they are, and because of what the girlfriend thought was missing. And he was trying so hard to make himself be like that. But you can understand with his background with his mother, how hard that would be for him.
Right.
So that was just fascinating to me. And I was wondering if you could tell a little bit about his relationship with his girlfriend.
Sure, Jennifer. The part of the story is really about, it's kind of a coming of age story in a way. You can be any age and come of age. So Nate is 30, and I think he comes of age finally in this book, after the death of his father, after this kind of introduction to a new mother. But parallel is the story about Nate and Jennifer, who's been his longtime girlfriend, but he really hasn't been able to commit. And he doesn't really know why. It's not like there's anything wrong with her or anything, anything. She's the greatest, but he's just not committing. And through the relationship that he ultimately develops with Amy, the mystery woman who comes into his life, it kind of parallels the relationship with Jennifer, or kind of informs the relationship with Jennifer. And it's because of this relationship, this tortured relationship that he has with Amy, but has to work his way through in a very deliberate, very, kind of painful, but very cathartic and ultimately hopeful way. It's how he's able to figure out how he feels about Jennifer. And there is kind of this parallel there, and everybody's kind of helping each other, make things work, but how they get there is very twisty and just not clear cut. And she's a great person, but I'd say I think she's about 30 also as he is. And she's like, look, I love you and you're great, but I can't wait around forever, not to get married, but just to know where we stand, to have a commitment, maybe live together, maybe, I mean, she's she's got a career, she's a dance instructor, she's been a ballet dancer professionally. She just wants to know that she's not wasting too much time ultimately, as much as she cares about him. And that, and ultimately he has to sort of become less internal about his feelings and more she pulls things out of him, which is part of his coming of age. So he makes a huge turn as a person in this thing. He doesn't become a different person, but I think the best of him comes out as the relationships kick in the book for him.
His self-growth in this book is really amazing.
Yeah.
And I got to be honest, I was rooting for Jennifer the entire time because she's such a fabulous character. And I just felt like this is a really great woman.
Oh, that's great.
Wake up.
Yeah.
I wanted to shake him.
She's also tough. She's like, she's supportive, she's kind, she's generous, but she's also tough, and she knows when to walk away, and she doesn't make it easy for him. And as she shouldn't, because you have to test somebody to see if they're really there for you. And also ultimately the dynamics kind of shift between the two of them, who's kind of going after who over time. And but it's really so much about his self-knowledge that he gains and how this journey with Amy really kind of informs the journey with Jennifer. And then he goes to therapy, and so there's a whole part of the book about his working with the therapist and how she kind of is able to parallel these situations and have him see things he hasn't seen before. So it's a tough journey for him.
Yes, but you're rooting for him because considering what he found out about his mother, it's like you feel like this has to work out for him, he's been through so much because he's very close with his father.
Right.
And so it is a gigantic loss. And the appearance of Amy comes on the heels of him losing his father. So your heart is really goes towards him, really goes to Jennifer and one other person, Cody the dog.
Cody the dog.
Now, do you have a dog like Cody?
I do. Cody's a lab mix. We have a full lab. We've had 5 full labs over time. We just a couple of months ago got a new lab named Bella. And Cody is kind of there are people. We're not one of them necessarily, but there are people who have dogs and they just take them everywhere, and they're the kind of dogs that you just take to work with you. You take everywhere you go. And he uses Cody not only as a companion, because he's kind of a solitary guy, but also as primarily kind of like thematically as a buffer between people that he doesn't. So there's always something he knows there's always something to divert attention away from emotional landmines. The dog is there. They can start focusing on the dog. There's always something else to focus on as opposed to just, you and me talking. So over the course of the book, you kind of see him saying, okay, I'm going to go myself. I'm not going to take the dog. I don't need that buffer this time. But I've made everybody dog people in the book, so they like having him around. But yeah, he's kind of a mirror in a way of Nate and Nate's well-being and emotional state at any given time.
And of course, authors love books that have books in them. And there are lots of books in this because Jim, his father, was a professor of literature. So did you enjoy that?
I love that. And, Jim as he's a very, he's one of those kind of very erudite, but very cool guys. And he's a college professor. Everybody loves him. He's just a cool guy. But he's got he's very deeply intellectual, I think way more so than I am. So his books, and he is of a certain age where, the books that maybe he read in college, or the classics that you end up reading in college, and to this day you read in high school and college, really were his focus. I mean, I kind of referred to in the book that he could read anything, trashy books, biographies, whatever, but he loved Joan Didion was his favorite favorite author. And she's definitely, I mean, as iconic writer as she was, she was definitely an acquired taste for a lot of people. So he just loved her, and that was kind of his thing. And he loved all the classics and all of that, and taught all the classics. And a lot of these books, whether it was To Kill a Mockingbird, Wuthering Heights, Great Gatsby, it opens with him teaching The Great Gatsby.
Mm-hmm.
They're all kind of representative of kind of things he feels and relation and his life too. I think that part's kind of subtle, but and Nate is not a reader at all. But when you grow up with a father who is such a staunch reader, little by little, you kind of work your way. And after Jim dies, he goes into Jim's library of books and starts to really, really read them differently than he did. And it's a way of staying close to the father by rereading, some of these books, rereading The Great Gatsby, rereading all of these books that his dad loved so much. And he kind of preserves the father's den library in the house that he takes over from the father, with that. But I love writing about, I love books. I love writing about books, and literature professors. I mean, we all had them in college. They kind of run the gamut from the Tweety type to the hip, long hair type, to the pompous type. It's an interesting gamut of personalities in that. So I kind of schmooze them all together.
And so let's ask something about you. How you grew up in New York?
Yes.
Yay for that.
Grew up on Long Island. Yes.
Yeah, I grew up in Queens.
Valley Stream, Long Island.
We're like
North
relatives.
High School,
what?
Valley Stream, North High School, Valley Stream, Long Island, North High School. For anybody out there who may be watching.
Which high school did you go to?
North High School. In
North
Valley
High
Stream.
School.
Yep.
Okay, and just in case there's anyone from Francis Lewis, that's where I went.
Okay.
And what I want to ask you is how you made the decision to leave New York and go out to LA and become the writer you are.
Yeah, good question. Well, it kind of was a decision that was not foisted on me, but sort of made for me in a way. I was working in New York after I graduated from college. My first job was I was a movie publicist, and I ultimately ended up working for Universal Pictures in Manhattan doing publicity. And I did that for a few years, and then there was some changes at the studio level, and they asked me to come out and kind of replace somebody who was let go in this management change. And I always loved California. I hadn't been out there many times, but I was out there a few times, and I loved it. And I loved the concept of California and all of that, and felt it was something that I wanted to experience. So it was a good job offer. So I went out. They moved me out and all of that, and I worked for the studio for about 4 years. And then ultimately I realized that I wanted to be, as I say, on the other side of the table. We'd have these giant marketing meetings at the studio, and half of the circular table would be the marketing people, the other half would be the movie, the people from the films, the actors, the directors, producers. And I just felt like I was on the wrong side of the table. I wanted to be on the creative side of the table. And eventually, it took a while, but eventually I left the job and started writing television, started writing episodic television, and that I started getting work doing that, freelance work and all of that. And that was kind of a slow process, but it was kind of a beginning of a career all over again. And TV writing sort of expanded into screenwriting, which expanded into TV movie writing, which is what I've done a lot these last number of years, into playwriting, novel writing. And I'm also a journalist. I'm a film reviewer for the Los Angeles Times, which I've done since 2007. So yeah, it's kind of, the opportunities were kind of put in front of me, and then it ultimately got me out to LA, which I love living in, and very happy to be here. But would I have gotten here without that job? I don't know. I could be living in New York or Manhattan or Avon, Connecticut, to this day.
I doubt Avon, Connecticut, but
yeah,
who knows?
Yeah, you never know.
So do you write one thing at a time, or are you working on different things?
Good question.
A bunch of things at a time.
Generally, I like working on writing one thing at a time. I may be doing other things while I'm writing something. So in other words, like, if I'm writing this book, I may be working on a screenplay, that I'm hired to do. I may be working on outlines or pitches for movies or TV movies or whatever. But the way it's worked out for me is that I really haven't had to write more than one thing at a time. Though I will say, when I was writing Mother I Never Had, every morning I would write a page or two. I was adapting my last book, The Last Birthday Party, as a screenplay. And so I did that kind of simultaneously. But it wasn't an assignment. I was doing that to then hopefully sell the screenplay or make something happen with it. So the timing was different. I was just able to do it as I went along. And I just didn't want too much time to pass after Last Birthday Party came out to have an actual screenplay. So I did that at the same time. But generally speaking, I like to work on one script or one project at a time, even though there may be other things related going on, at the same time.
I'm a one thing at a time person myself,
Yeah.
but I know there are so many writers who can work on many things at once.
Yeah.
I enjoy sticking to the thing I'm on. So
yeah, and it gets
that's
it
why I
done.
asked you that.
Yeah, theoretically, it gets it done faster. It's like if I'm working on a script or a book or whatever, and I do film review. I do a film review a week or a few a week. I just do that on the side. Or that's my focus for that particular day, and then I go back to writing what I was doing. You juggle, and as a writer, a lot of it is what's the schedule? When does somebody need something by? When you have a deadline, it's very easy. It just gets done. I don't know how it just gets done. And so you just put it in that way. But every writer works differently. Some writers like to be working on. It's like people who read books. They're like, oh, I like to read 3 books at a time. I couldn't do that. I have to focus on one book at a time. But everybody's different.
So as a novelist, what advice would you give someone who is writing a book now and is dreaming of being a published novelist?
Well, I would say the fact that you're writing it is great. So, good for you. And it's a great beginning. And I would say keep writing it. Don't give up. Don't worry about when I wrote my last book, The Last Birthday Party, I honestly did not write it with an eye to it getting published. I mean, obviously you write it, you hope that that's where it will end up, but you kind of can't do that. You have to write it for the joy of writing it, for the experience of writing it, for the discipline of writing it. And then see what you have. You write your 90,000 words, whatever, see what you end up with. And then you can worry about the selling part of it. And I think, like with screenwriting, I think a lot of people worry too much about what I'm going to do with it afterwards, as opposed to just having that to do something with. And time goes very, very fast. And, if you can have a script or a book or anything, a play, anything written over the course of a period of time, and have that project to show for it, then you can do something. If it's good, you can do something with it. But I just say to people who want to write a book, know what you're doing, understand the process of writing, the concept of writing, and if you haven't written before, do your homework, do your due diligence. That's a hard one. Due diligence. Take classes, work with writing groups. You can't just sit and go out and write a book if you don't have writing experience. It does take a building of it. Learn about editing. I've said to people, if you haven't written a book before, take a journalism 101 class. It's the best way to learn how to structure sentences and how to write tight and how not to be repetitive and all of that. People don't even think about journalism when it comes to writing a book necessarily, but it's a great tool to because I don't think it's hard to teach fiction writing per se. I think a lot of it is your voice. A lot of it is do you understand the tenets of writing, of sentence structure, of paragraph structure, of story structure? Have a story. I mean, I'm sure, Marilyn, it's happened to you a million times. People will come to you and say, oh, I got this great idea for a book or a script.
All the time.
And it's like, that's a good idea, but what's the story?
Yeah.
This is the seed. What's the story? And make sure if you're writing something, you have a story that, because like with a screenplay, so often an author will have bang up first 40, 50 pages, and then they're not really sure where to go. So know your beginning, middle, and end of your story, and what themes you want to explore, and what your characters are doing wrong, and how they're going to change over the course of time, and who's going to come into their life to change that person before you sit down to do the writing. But I just think, what, if they say anything you've written is better than nothing at all, and that sounds kind of generic or whatever, but in reality, it's always easier to rewrite something than to start from scratch. And I just say, do it.
People sometimes say, I want to write a book. What should I do? And the answer is right.
Right.
I mean,
and if a book is kind of daunting, write a short story. Write a short story, write a chapter of something. You end up with 10 pages. You can expand it. It can be the springboard for something else. You have to just do it. You have to get the words down on the paper. And, you know, it's not for everybody, but at least if you try and it works for you and it's satisfying and you feel like you have a knack for it, you continue. And if it's something that, you know, really you like it, but it's not really working for you, or you don't have the, you know, you don't have the wherewithal to continue. And a lot of writing, being a writer, is what is the rest of your life like? You know, what are you making a living at? What are your family obligations? You know, what do you want out of your own life? You know, writing can be a very kind of, it can be a very kind of encompassing job. It's like having homework 24 hours a day. So it really depends upon where you are, you know, but I just say in the general sense, just go do it, you know, make it happen, and, you know, see what you end up with.
That's great, because so many writers are employed in other things, and you know, they're getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to write before they go to work.
Right. And that takes a lot of discipline and a lot of, it's great if people can do that. But the pages do pile up, you know, and like I said before, you don't want to think about, you don't want to think about the end. You want to think about the beginning and the middle and the process of writing, and see where it takes you.
What do you think the best part of your book is? The beginning, the middle, or the end?
Oh,
I like the whole thing.
Oh, thank you. But this book, well, you know, there's a section that I really love in this book where Nate goes up to Fresno, California. The book is primarily set in Los Angeles, but his father's family and other people in the book, they're from Fresno, California. And there's something that, well, there's a lot of convergence of emotion and people in Nate's life that he never knew, that all come together in this whole section set up in Fresno. So I love that, because there's a lot of, it's a very telling part of the book, and that's where a lot of things come together and a lot of stuff hits the fan. And Fresno is a city that I spent a lot of time in and really like, and so it was fun to write about that. So I really like that part. That happens right smack in the middle of the book. But I do like endings of books, because they tend to be very, it's like a snowball, and they tend to move fast, and you know, you get to the next, you know, you're sewing up all the holes in the story and sliding to your conclusion. So I like that. I like that when they can really you know, just sort of build a head of steam, and then you know, you're kind of like taken out on a high by finishing reading the book. What about you? What for Crazy? I want to just say, give a shout out to Marilyn's books. Her last book is Crazy to Leave You. It's a wonderful comedy. I loved it. Definitely check it out. But what do you like in that book, for example, which is a comedy? Which part do you like the best? So which part speaks to you the most?
I love in a book when someone gets their comeuppance.
Yeah.
Because I have the most fun, you know, doing the payoff.
Yeah.
And in Crazy to Leave You, there's this one scene that I just knew I was going to do from the beginning, where the main character's brother-in-law gets his. And it happens at a big family event, so there are plenty of people watching.
Right.
So I would have to say that I love that kind of payoff kind of thing.
Yeah. That was definitely a great scene.
But I never know what I'm going to do until I literally sit and write. So do you outline, or you go by the seat of your pants?
Well, on the last birthday party, I did not outline, but having written so many screenplays, you know, the story, kind of classic storytelling structure, which books generally are too, is kind of ingrained in how I do it. So it's sort of like, it's kind of like the shadow that's always following me. So I was able to I knew where I wanted the book to begin, where I wanted it to go, you know, at what would be the end of the first act of a movie. I knew what the middle was going to be. I knew what the low point was going to be 3/4 of the way in, and I knew how I wanted it to end. How I got there, though, was a surprise all the time to me. And as a result, that book has a lot of surprises to it, which I didn't know, you know, until I wrote them.
But they are surprises, because you have new characters entering who makes such a difference in his life.
Right.
You know, in my book, I had the main character's sister appear, and I all of a sudden thought, I love this girl.
Yeah.
I want this girl to have a lot of play in this book.
Yeah.
And so I don't know until I meet them.
Yeah, you don't know. Like, you don't know that till you start writing. It's like on a TV show, like on a sitcom. The supporting character can turn out to be the most interesting of the characters, just the way the character evolves. And then they get their own spin-off of their own show. And we all have those supporting characters we love. It's easier to write supporting characters we love, because it's less time. We can give them quirks. We don't have to like them or relate to them quite as much as we do our main characters. They can be really fun.
Yeah, and you don't have to worry so much about their background and making everything sync. They can just be
exactly.
a good time, like you're saying, like a
Yeah.
second banana on a TV show.
TV
So,
show,
of
yeah.
all the things you write, what do you enjoy the most? Do you enjoy plays, film, novels?
It's sort of like which child is your favorite? It's hard to say, but I don't know. One thing I love. Well, I love them all. I would say I can't say I love them all equally because I've experienced them differently. I've written two novels and it's been really joyful experiences. So that's been really positive. I love the writing of them and the whole marketing of them and everything that the selling of them, everything we've done with them. But I've spent so many more years as a screenwriter, and have learned so much and love writing scripts and when I've been fortunate enough to get scripts made, to see them come to life, to see them come to fruition, particularly when they're good, is really it's very satisfying, and all of that, and to share them. I mean, as a writer, we just want to share what we write with other
Mhm.
people. Hope that it entertains them, it moves them, it makes them cry. They see some of them, they're themselves in a character, they see their family in something, all of that. You take them to a place that they've never been, which is always really, really great, whether you're the writer or the observer, the viewer.
And your book
So
is a tour of Los Angeles,
oh yeah,
which
yeah,
I loved because
yeah,
I
yeah,
know it a little bit from going
yeah,
out there, but I don't know like places like you were naming. I
right,
was just
yeah.
really enjoying that.
Well, the trick with writing a lot, being very specific about places and doing that to kind of really create the feel of a city and feel like you're there, is you hope that these places that you write that are real are still exist when your book comes out. And I think fortunately I've been okay with that, but I'm careful about restaurants I pick or whatever, because restaurants disappear very fast. So I try to use places that have been around forever. But yeah, I really enjoy all the disciplines. I mean, listen, when I've written stage plays, which have primarily been comedies, sitting with a live audience and experiencing your work as a writer for a comedy, especially in hearing, belly laughs, with hundreds of people sitting there. I mean, there's really nothing like that live experience. It's like live TV, in a way. So I love that. I love that too. But I don't know. I'm a equal opportunity. I have equal affection for, I think, all of my work.
Well, you said you're turning the last birthday party into a screenplay.
Yeah, I've written the screenplay.
What is doing that like? Taking your
It,
own work and turning it
it was
into a screenplay?
I've adapted a number of books into movies, other people's books into movies, and you can be it's much more surgical, because you can see the X-ray of that story from somebody else a little bit easier than your own. So if you have to cut things out, you have to change things. Certainly not every book is a movie or structured as a movie, so you have to figure that part of it out. But with my book, uh, it wasn't an especially long book. It was an average length book, Last Birthday Party, but there was so much in it, and the main character his voice was so much a part, his internal voice. It was written in the third person, but his internal voice was such a big part of the book, and that's a very hard thing to translate onto the screen. So when I wrote the screenplay, I really had to cut a lot out. I really had to really sort of find the guts of the story and really focus on the main elements of each character, and it's a little more from the highlights of the book, onto the script. And even then, the script I wrote is maybe 5-10 pages longer than I would like it to be. It's in the ballpark, but it's still a little bit longer. But I cut it down a lot. It was a great experience doing it. I really enjoyed it, and I think let's put it this way: if I can get it made, either as a film or a TV movie or a limited TV series, I think that screenplay is a great place to start. They undergo so much renovation anyway, but I think somebody can look at the story and say, oh yes, this is very castable. It's funny. It's got heart. People will relate to it. And yeah, I see what we can do with this. Now let's go in and rewrite. And that's generally what it is with scripts anyway.
And The Mother I Never Had, are you going to write that into a screenplay?
Yes, I definitely will. And I think, you want people who are interested in your books as movies to read the book. And it's hard to get people to read books in general. So it's like they think reading a script takes less time, and it does, but it's a different experience, And ultimately it's the story. If somebody likes your 2-sentence log line, they may buy it. It doesn't matter what it's about. If they like the story, that's part of it. But I just hope people read the books. As you know, the books are very, there's a lot to a book, and I think they're much richer. They can be much richer experiences, because in a book you are providing the camera as the author. As opposed to the screenplay, the director will handle that. The camera itself will handle that. But you've got to do a few different jobs writing a novel. So anyway, should we bring Julie back in and see?
I miss her. I miss her. Come back.
Great.
I miss you guys too.
Hello.
We just met, Julie, and you went away.
Went away too quick. That was such a great conversation. I gotta let you guys go all night. Marilyn,
we
great
can keep doing it.
questions. Yeah, really good questions. And
Thank
it's
you.
so the fun part and not so fun part is that sometimes the comments come in a while ago for some of the things you were talking about. So Bill Taub is on here and he said, "Go Queens, Forest Hills." So I think that was in.
Hey Bill, how are you?
So, and he's got a couple other comments here. And he does say that Gary is way too prolific and that you're inspiring him to write the thing he's been procrastinating
Right.
about.
Do it. Just do it.
Yeah. But his question is that he says your titles are very high concept. How do you come up with them?
Oh, well, having written a lot of movies, there's so much, like I said earlier, sometimes I've come up with the title before, or in plays too. I wrote a play called April, May, and June that I just thought of that title one day, April, May, and June. That'd be interesting. What can I write that's April, May, and June? It turns into the story of 3 adult sisters who gather at their late mother's house to go through the last of her belongings and what they discover about her, but about each other as sisters. And so that just turned into something from that title. But so if my books can have kind of a high concept, and I think people confuse titles so much, even whether it's movies or whatever. It's like, wait, what's it called? The mother I never knew. My mother. You never know. So you want to try to make it, as memorable as you can, and that actually, is illustrative of what the story is about. It's tricky because I read you see a lot of book titles, and it's like, did I read that? Didn't I read 9 books named that? And there aren't a lot of new titles out there, frankly. So, you're probably going to come up with, I think there hasn't been this title, but, I think there's been things that are close to it. But yeah, titles are fun, and you have to grab people. And when you're in a bookstore, especially, and you're looking at books, it's the cover and the title, and then you pick it up and you turn it over and you see if the story appeals to you. But the first thing somebody will see in a bookstore or online is that book cover and the title. So you want to kind of grab people. That's the fun part of it.
Well, we talked about how many we did. I think Marilyn talked about it too, how great the cover is. How many iterations did you go through with that cover? It's so
interesting.
Good.
We my publisher Hadley House, one of their partners is the creative executive there, and she does all the covers, and it morphed over time. It was always generally this, but the colors changed. We really worked hard on the color, and the
font's really good too.
The font's really cool.
Yeah.
I had the font was something that I really liked, and it always stayed the same. But we played around a lot with because Nate, the main character, is a landscaper. I really wanted it to have a really heavy landscaping feel to it, a garden feel, growth, life, that kind of thing. And there's a part in the book where he talks about planting a Japanese maple tree, which are very distinctive trees. And I figured, I talked to Alicia, who does the covers, and I said, maybe there's something we can do with maple leaves. And she came up with these very bold maple leaves, and they were generally the colors of Japanese maple leaves are a little more purple or whatever, but there are some that are on this order, and we just loved it because it just jumps out. And of course, now that the book is coming out in the fall, it's perfect the way it turns out. So yeah, it definitely, it's like writing something. It goes through lots of iterations until you get it right. But yeah, we had a really good team putting it together, and I think it's really beautiful.
It's really good. And so just real quick about it cracks me up that Fresno's in here. I have a lot of family that is from Fresno too, but that's usually not a place where people are writing about. So I love
Right.
that.
Well,
you said
in fact,
Fresno.
I actually just did an interview with the Fresno Bee yesterday, which is the daily paper in Fresno, about the fact that Fresno stars in a book. It's not, it's like New York or LA or Chicago. I
Right.
mean, it's not as common. But I needed a city that was basically one could drive to that from LA, but you'd have to stay overnight. And having family and friends there, having spent so much time in Fresno, I knew it really well. And so was able to draw on my, appreciation of the city to tell this story and be as specific about these Fresno locations as I am about the LA locations.
Is Shaw Avenue still the thing?
Shaw Avenue is it's still there. It plays a very important part in this book. Definitely a lot happens on Shaw Avenue in this book. So yeah.
I've spent a lot of time as a young person in Fresno. So, and Marilyn, this is a question for both of you, and we'll go to you first, Gary, and then when you're writing, do you write with an audience in mind, or are you writing strictly for just your pleasure and you're getting the story out?
Well, it's kind of a combination of two things. I mean, you certainly don't want to write in a vacuum, and I say to newer writers, whatever you have to do to get something down on the page, do it. Don't worry about your audience. Write something you love that makes you happy, that will get you whatever gets you to sit down in front of that computer and write. Do it. But if you're trying to make a living out of it and all of that, maybe after you've kind of explored what you want to write as a newer writer, you have to consider that there's an audience for something. But you have to love it first, because if you don't, probably nobody else will. But you have to try to to keep the reader or the viewer in mind in terms of what they might want to see, what they may relate to. They always say your main character has to be likable in a movie or a TV show or a book. Well, that's been proven wrong many times.
Some unreliable characters out there.
Yeah. Right, exactly. I mean, but it's not do we like them, it's do we relate to them, and can we,
are they compelling? Is there something compelling about them?
Tony Soprano was not a likable guy, but we were into him. We related to a lot of his emotional angst and all of that, and who he was. So that you try to create gripping characters that people can have some kind of association with, some kind of can just align themselves with in some way. And then when you're dealing with a very kind of an emotional family story like The Mother I Never Had, is you try to think about what I know. I explained earlier about what I felt about losing a parent and wanting another parent, and et cetera. You have to put yourself in the reader's position of like, how would they feel about that? What does it say? What are they going to think about their own parent? I've had a lot of people read the book. Some reviews have come out that said it really made me think about my own family and where I stood within my family, and in a good way, and so that's part of it. But yeah, I think you have to really pay attention to your audience. But you do have to write. You have to kind of write what you feel you can write best, and hope that people will respond, but keep them in mind, I think.
How about you, Marilyn? Do you think about your audience when you're writing, or do you just kind of go?
No, I like to entertain myself. I just, if I'm sitting and writing something and it makes me laugh or makes me feel like I'm crying, I feel like I will be relating to someone who's going to feel that same thing. And maybe it's not just that part, but there's another part where it's like, oh yeah, that's me. And I'm not alone. I like to feel like I'm entertaining people and making them feel not alone in their thoughts. Right. I wrote a scene recently takes place in a gynecologist's office, and the woman can't decide how to fold her clothes before the doctor comes in. And I showed it to my sister. That is something that
we all do.
Right? She said, oh my God, I thought that was just me. Like trying to make my clothes really neat, even though I'm really a slob. And it's stuff like that that I really like to hit on. Something that, I've thought about, but does anyone else think this, or is this just me?
Is it just me? But it's probably universal. It's funny because I interviewed just a little author named John Grisham last year.
Never heard of him.
Never heard of him. And we did he was the same way though. He said it was one of the short stories that he wrote. And I asked him, I said, this was a really funny short story. Did it make you laugh? And he's like, I'm so glad you asked that, because I love making myself laugh.
I
same
think it's a
thing.
pretty fair bet if you make yourself laugh as you're writing it because you're really so immersed in it. You're not being real objective. If you can make yourself laugh, somebody else is probably going to laugh. I
Yeah.
found that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is something. So we're sort of running out of our time here. Gary, you mentioned that you might be doing some in-person events. Are you doing something coming up here in LA or
Yes,
anything?
I am in LA. I'm doing on this coming Monday, October 17th at 7 p.m. at Roman's bookstore in Pasadena.
Yep.
Which is interesting because the book mainly takes place in an area called Eagle Rock, which is right outside Pasadena. So we've got a little local connection there. And then
Perfect.
I'm doing on Sunday, the 23rd, October 23rd at 3 p.m. Another book signing and interview at Diesel.
Love it.
Diesel, a bookstore in Brentwood, which is a
love
really
both of
great
those
place.
stores.
Yeah.
So if anybody's watching this, it's up in LA.
Yeah, I posted online. Look on Facebook. There's under events. They're on there. It's been getting some attention. Hopefully, it'll show up. Love the support. Love to meet. But anybody, a fan, anybody who's interested in books, wants to talk about books and screenwriting, and I'm being interviewed by a couple of other very good authors, in addition to Marilyn. So so it should be fun. Thank you.
So
Thanks
what's your website for people to go to and
the
they can see your
website
socials?
is www.garygoldsteinla.com. Find out.
So Gary Goldstein together, LA. Okay.
LA.com. You can find out way more than you ever want to know about me on that website.
Love it. Marilyn, how about you?
out.
Do you have a website or something that you like to direct people to?
I do have a website, three W's, MarilynSimonRothstein.com.
.com. Okay.
NYC. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, right. EDU. Do you have do you do social media very much, or do you do
Yes, I'm on Facebook a lot. Find me on Facebook just under my name, Marilyn Simon Rothstein, or Marilyn Simon Rothstein author. I have 2 accounts because I have so much to say.
I love
it.
We want
thank you so much for having us.
And Marilyn is very funny in her posts. You will be absolutely entertained by Marilyn's posts. I was guffaw when I read them.
Love it. Well, it's been a delight, Gary. It's wonderful
thanks for having
back,
us,
Marilyn.
Julie.
So what a great conversation. Thank you both for spending some time with us here, and best of luck with all of your books. But Gary with A Mother I Never Had, and we will see you next time.
I hope so. Thanks again, Julie. Thank you.
All right,
thank you, Julie, and thank you, Gary.
Yeah, thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Oops, hold on. Oh, there we go.